2. The War of Billy the Kid. Chapter 5. Lincoln County War. To the average dweller in that portion of the Great West known as New Mexico, the Lincoln County War is as well known as the internecine War of the Roses to the people of the time of York and Lancaster. Its causes and its results yet form the theme of conversation around many a campfire on a winter's night or summer's evening, and it will be in many years before the tale will have grown old and uninteresting. Where nothing else needed to make it live is the mere fact that the kid was a leading spirit of a deadly strife which sufficed to give it a certain place in history. Much as small men are known as the husbands of Mr. or Mrs. the actress or the lecturer, will the Lincoln imbroglio be known as the War of Billy the Kid. According to Marion Turner, who was a prominent actor in the war, the trouble began with the determination of old John Chisum and partner Alex McSwain to establish a monopoly on the stock grazing business and make themselves in truth the cattle kings of the Pecos Valley. This valley is next to that of the Rio Grande, the most important in the territory, running as it does almost along the entire length from north to south, and is, with the exception of Rio Hondo, the only one of any size in Lincoln County. To have entire command of such a large range would be a fortune in itself. Chisum drove in 80,000 head of cattle. The herds of the smaller rancheros were swept away, as if by avalanche, by a multitude of hooves and horns. Naturally enough, those who lost little all in this manner attempted to reclaim their animals. This was dangerous business, and collisions between herders were a daily occurrence. The smaller fry banded together with the leadership of Murphy, Dolan Co, men who had important cattle interests and were anxious to defend them. Both sides were enlisted all the strength and influence they could command and prepared for that big war to be a deadly conflict. Chisum and McSwain, in a happy moment, hired the kid, and his daredevil ways, his deadly marksmanship, his perfect command of a horse, and combined with what seemed to be an absolute delight in murder, and soon caused him to be made the leader of this faction. The strife progressed, with alternate success and defeat for each party. Early in 1879, Chisum arranged for the appointment of the kid as deputy constable, and clothed in this authority, he was given a warrant for the arrest, on a trivial charge, of Billy Morton and Frank Baker, two herders employed by Tom Captain. This captain, by the way, used to live in Lafayette County, Missouri, and was a partner of the Honorable Stephen B. Elkins, himself a Missouri boy, later delegated to Congress from New Mexico, and now one of the moneyed men of New York. The kid saddled his horse when told what he was to be done, and without a word to any of his comrades, silently rode off to the range in search of his prey, accompanied by one McCluskey. He found Morton and his companions in a camp near the eastern boundary of the county, and showing him the warrant, he said, "Here are my prisoners. Come along." "What do you want from me?" said Morton in a threatening tone. "Shut up or I'll blow your brains out. You've been working against Chisum. That's enough." "We'll see about this pretty soon, young man," said Baker. "It's a free country. No man arrests me without I know what it's for." "I haven't told you white-livered friend the reason. Hold your tongue, or I'll stop it forever with a bullet." At this point, McCluskey interfered and remonstrated with the young Desperado. You don't mean to kill a defenseless man, do you?" he said. "If I wish to, yes, and you too." With these words, the kid drew his revolver, and before the astonished McCluskey could move his hand, shot him with his tricks. "You see how I treat a man who fooled with me, do you?" the murderer said, as he scornfully kicked the lifeless form at his feet. "Be careful what you do, or I'll serve you the same as I served him." Chaining the two men together by the wrists and carefully securing them to the saddle, he placed both of them on McCluskey's horse and started back at a slow trot toward Chisum's ranch. The feelings of the prisoners can easily be imagined. Should they be taken to camp when the vengeance of Chisum would have upon their heads? There was, at least, a chance of escape. If the handcuffs could only be loosened and the chain parted, a successful break might be made. Those ifs must be gotten one way in the next 20 miles. The men worked cautiously and had almost freed themselves when the watchful eye of the kid spied their movements. Without saying a word, he coolly pulled his rifle from his shoulder and fired twice at them. The distance was only 10 feet, and his aim sure the reports were followed by the simultaneous fall of both Morton and Baker, and in a moment their souls had flown up to what we may presume was a greener range, where even the cowboy has a place. Shot dead without hardly an excuse. Thus the kid added 2 more to the list of those he had felt his deadly power. Thus far he had killed 4 men, and the career of his pseudo-James boy had hardly begun. Fearful in its beginning, the reader must judge the righteousness at the end. Riding into camp, the kid informed Chisum of what he had done, and asked that the 2 men be sent out to bury him. "Where's McCluskey?" asked Chisum. "None of your goddamn business," replied the kid. "It is my business, and I will know. I'm not afraid of you. You may as well understand it any time now." "Oh, come on, old fellow," he said, changing his tone and manner. "I was just bantering with you a little. To be honest about it, I killed Mick." "Killed him? That's the racket. Why? What's he done?" "Too infernally inquisitive. Didn't know his place either. Thought he'd try to boss the job, but I settled him quickly." "He was my best man, next to you," said Chisum, after a pause in which he eyed the kid closely and rubbed his chin reflectively. "Don't care if it was. He had to go." "You know, kid, that this affair will leak out and the officers will be down here to inquire into it and arrest you?" "Chisum, you must think I'm a fool. They're no more for Brady and Hinman than I do for a dog. If they get the drop on me, all right, but the kid won't be caught napping, and don't you forget it." "I'm afraid they'll bring the troops down on us." "Let them do it. If we can't whip the company of bluecoats, why then I'll change my name and herd sheep in the States." With this dissertation, the kid carelessly sauntered down to his tent and threw himself down to catch a few hours' sleep before the next morning should dawn. Chapter 6. Numbers 5 and 6. As sent by Chisum, the news of the killing of Morton, McCluskey, and Baker quickly reached the ears of the authorities of the country. Although wild speculation, the triple murder could not be winked at, or a reign of lawlessness would ensure destructive of all the already loose fabric of society that contains elements of disaster of a great moment to the cattlemen and their employees, as well as to the few farmers and storekeepers in Lincoln County. When Sheriff Brady first heard of the kid's bloody deed from the lips of a special detective, who in turn learned the fact from one of Chisum's men, a friend of the murdered parties, and who had recently been discharged because of suspected intimacy with the opposing faction, he realized that in capturing the murder he would have no easy task to perform. The matter was talked over carefully with his deputy, George Hinman, and it was resolved to at once proceed with Chisum Ranch, and, if possible, effect the capture. No one else was taken into the secret, as it was feared that the kid might be informed by the intended raid of the officers and prepare himself accordingly. The precaution was, however, an unnecessary one, since he was always ready to meet a personal enemy of an officer of the law, knowing himself to be practically an outcast with the hand of almost every man against him. The news came to Bradley Wednesday. The murders were committed Monday. The officers left Thursday and bound for the home of the kid. Each was heavily armed and rode horses of fine staying powers. The trip was a solemn one. They fully recognized the fact that the chances of coming back alive were hardly even. Indeed, before the start was made, they settled their business affairs and otherwise made ready for an emergency. "I'll confess I don't like this," replied Headman to his superior as they galloped out of Lincoln. "You're not afraid, are you?" replied Brady. "Oh, man ever saw George Hinman turn pale, even when he looked down the barrel of a rifle in the hands of the enemy," he said. "But I can't shake off the feeling, somehow or other, that we won't come back out of this fight alive." "Kiddoo's a bad man, I know," replied Bradley, after a moment's thought. "If I take him off his guard, he will be my prisoner, and no blood will be spilled either." "Catch a cat sleeping. The kid's been surrounded by men who will defend him to the last. I tell you, it's a bad job. We are in for it, though." It will be seen that they did not walk into the trap blindly, but with eyes open. It is all very well to praise the immortal 600 who made the charge of Balaclava, one of those becoming enthusiastic at the bravery of the men of Bunker Hill or Vicksburg. but to the impressionist mind, this act of Brady and Hinsman had more elements of heroism than the others. The one faced death in behalf of an idea, surrounded by all the glory of Congress and the insanity of battle. The other, in behalf of law and order, quietly took even chances of death or life without the murmur of a loan. A few words will tell the story. All day Thursday, the kid seemed possessed with the idea that something would happen. As he expressed himself to a comrade, "Either I or a man I met whom will die today." At an early hour, he cleansed his rifle carefully, loaded it with a heavy ball, an extra charge of powder, placed the new cap in position, and loaded in the proper equipment of his derringers, and was never a moment off his guard. Between the hours of 11 and 12, his watchful eye discerned 2 horsemen riding slowly to the ranch from the west. At an instant he espied them. They were fully 5 miles off. In 40 minutes they would be at the ranch. In 20 they would be near enough to be recognized. As they came nearer, making a detour to the south, hoping to reach a grove and escape observation until it was almost the destination, the kid procured a spyglass and leveled it in the direction of the approaching horsemen. "The officers," the father said, quietly walking to McSwain's adobe, which was located at the mid-side of the little hamlet. He placed himself in readiness. 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes had elapsed. The sound was heard and around the corner, the measured tramp of approaching feet. The kid peered cautiously around the corner. The 2 officers. Then he discovered himself to them, and at the same time raising his rifle to his shoulder and pulling the trigger, with the barrel aimed at Brady's heart. There was a quick flash, and followed by a loud report and a white cloud of smoke. Then another flash and another report. Now the south wind quickly cleared the air. Stepping forward with the derringer drawn, the kid saw Brady and Hindman at his feet, one dead and the other breathing faintly, asking to be put out of his misery. "You shall go as quick as I send you," the cowboy said. "Give Baker my love." Then he placed the muzzle of his derringer at Hindman's right temple and finished the bloody work. By this time a crowd had gathered, but no one was so inclined dared to arrest the kid. Instead, he ordered his comrades to join him in an hour, fully equipped with arms, ammunition, and horses, saying that it would be too hot for them as soon as Baker's friends discovered the murder, and that escape must be made to the mountains where defense could be easily made. Accordingly, he gathered with him around a band of outlaws and desperadoes and defied county, territory, and the United States authorities. Chapter 7. The Crisis. The tacit defiance of the law, the reign of terror and bloodshed inaugurated by the kid, were met in a determined manner by the proper authorities. June 15th, 1879, 2 days after the occurrence mentioned in the preceding chapter, Marion Turner, deputy sheriff of Lincoln County, had a warrant placed in his hands for the arrest of the kid for the murder of Morton Baker, McCluskey, Bradley, and Hinman. Turner was a very brave man, but very wise. He knew that the man whom he had a warrant was a desperate character, and therefore desperate measures were resorted to effect his capture. Turner organized a posse of 35 men, consisting principally of ranchmen and cowboys of the anti-Chisum faction. In adopting this course, Turner not only took advantage of the general horror which every man would feel at the cold-blooded murders, but also the peculiar and intense hatred entertained against the kid and his gang by those who conceived their rights had been trampled by Chisum. The posse was not a very large one, but every man in the crowd was an expert handler of the rifle and could be depended on in an emergency. The emergencies were very liable to arise. This readiness and nervousness was a good and important factor of the problem. On the 17th day of June, after being out 2 days, Turner and his posse came upon the kid and his 63 men. The place where they met was a narrow canyon at the mouth of a range of low foothills. To the right was a thickly wooded expanse, and to the left huge boulders with here and there a straggling pine tree, while in front ran a small stream which had its source 10 miles distance to the north. The kid's party had made their camp 5 miles up the stream and had come down to the place where it left the hills in order to reconnoiter, when they met back with Turner's posse. The former divided, one division running back to protect their camp, the other remained to confront the posse, each side thus being evenly balanced. Turner halted nearly 100 yards from where the kid was standing, and arranging his forces in the best possible manner with each man's hand on his rifle, stepped out a few steps in ranks and read his warrant. To the requisition of a defiant answer was returned to the effect that they would never get him, dead or alive, whereupon Turner ordered his men to arrest him. They advanced at the double quick on horseback, but the kid, wishing to avoid a fight until he could effect a junction with the remainder of his gang, was as well secured a better position and hastily retreated. Seeing his purpose, the order was given to fire, but the aim of the posse was rendered uncertain by the motion of the horses, and only 2 men were hit, one being seriously and the other fatally wounded. None of the sheriff's party were touched by the returning foresight. The fight continued in this way for 5 miles, neither side shooting another fatal shot. A decided stand was made at the camp, and Turner drew off for consultation. But the camp all was bustle and confusion. A rude embankment had been thrown up, behind which the kid, his men, the horses, and pack animals were waiting to receive the unexpected onslaught. The consultation between Turner and his men resulted in an employment of strategy. They retired a short distance and halted just on the edge of the wood. 10 of the party formed a line along its edge, and the other 25 dashed into the wood with the intention of making a circuit and coming in upon the gang from the rear. This was easily accomplished, provided the ruse was successful, because the kid camp had joined in the woods on the right. The danger of the undertaking lay in the fact that if the plan was discovered, the little party of 10 would fall an easy prey to a foe outnumbering them 6-1. And the minutes that succeeded the departure of the 25 were anxious ones to those who remained. Every movement of the enemy was watched, and a show of preparation for renewing the conflict was kept up. 5 minutes had passed. The detour should have been made in that time. The kid appeared at the lead of his men and began to file out of the camp, confident in the superiority of numbers and his own charmed life. At this moment, not a second too soon, a yell was heard from behind. Turner had flanked them. They turned and another yell was heard. 10 who had guarded the operation from their comrades rushed up to the stream. A deadly fire was poured in from both sides, and for a moment all was confusion and panic. At this juncture the kid dashed forward, and calling upon his men to rally, broke through the opposing force, killing 1 of them and slightly wounding 2 more. He was followed by Turner, the nemesis. Volley after volley was fired, and the flight was so rapid that neither the dead nor the wounded were cared for. On, in feverish haste, crossing and recrossing the little stream, turning the fire and then savagely spurring their horses forward, they fairly flew. Of the 65 men whom the kid led into the canyon, only 40 escaped alive, while Turner lost but only 5. The odds had changed. They were not as favorable to the Desperado. Across the plain, dodging here and there, now advancing, then retreating, the 2 forces went, which each weakening vengeance than the other, each paying old scores and getting better to enemies. Strange as it may seem, this running fight lasted 2 days with scarcely a stop for food and water. The forces by this time had become considerably reduced, numbering but 25 each. Lieutenant Colonel Dudley of the famous 9th Cavalry, leaning that reinforcements were sent to the kid, took 2 companies of his regiment and went to Turner's assistance. As luck would have it, Dudley was first on the ground, and the kid and his gang at once retreated towards Lincoln, which was but a few miles distant. They took shelter in McSwain's house, one of the most elegantly furnished dwellings in the territory, in which only the fashionable were wont to enter. The cavalry rushed up, but were repulsed and fell back. Again the line was formed, this time on foot, and an advance was made. This fight raged furiously. It was a question of annihilation for one side or the other, and every man fought like a demon. Portholes were cut out, and rifle balls sent to the unerring aim. The house became a fort, and the garden surrounding it a battlefield. During the battle, Mrs. McSwain encouraged the garrison by playing martial airs on her piano and singing inspiring battle songs. The besieging posse soon got in the range of the piano from the sound, and shot it to pieces with their heavy buffalo rifles, the wife of McSwain narrowly escaping. This siege was of 3 days' duration. On the 3rd day of the fight, Turner, being convinced that he could not be conquered by legitimate warfare, ordered the house to be fired by throwing bucketfuls of blazing coal on the roof and inside the windows. This precipitated the crisis, and about dusk on the third day, the Desperados made a rush for their horses, with the intention of thereby effecting an escape. A hand-to-hand combat ensued in which 12 of the Kid's men and 2 of Turner's posse were killed, McSwain being among the number. During the rush from the burning house, Tom O'Farlers, a pard of the Kids, young and from San Antonio, Texas, noticed a friend fall. Although the storm of balls and buckshot rained around him, he coolly stopped, picked up his comrade, and was about to carry him when he noticed that he was dead. Throwing the body down, he drew a sword and fought his way out. This brave fellow was afterwards killed by a deputy sheriff, Garrett's posse, shortly after the capture of the Kid. The leader of the gang, the Kid, seemed to bear a charmed existence. 100 bullets were speeded towards him, and not one reached the mark. He escaped without a scratch, and with barely a dozen men fled, hotly pursued, but never caught. Immediately after this fearful flight, he reorganized his followers, received ascensions to his cause, and was again in condition to make an average New Mexican go to bed with a feeling of insecurity. The Kid, in the meanwhile, had added 5 names to his death toll, and now numbered 11.